time.
Call to order.
Can you hear me now?
Regular meeting of the Board of Directors, Wednesday, October 16th. And I will ask Kathleen if she would to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you.
Pray begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And
Can you hear me now?
termination of quorum.
President Johnson, all board members present, you have a quorum.
All right, with that, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll make that motion. I'll second it then. You win, Gary.
All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
So moved, so done. Item number 5, public comment. Members of the public may address the board at this time with regard to matters within the board's jurisdiction that are not listed on the agenda. State law prohibits the board of directors from discussing or taking action on items not included on the agenda. Members of the public will have opportunity for public comment on any item listed on the agenda when it is addressed on the agenda. And please limit your comments to 3 minutes or less. Are there any public comments at this time? Yes, ma'am, please go to the,
I'm Marjorie Smith.
no, we have one ahead of you. And go to the podium and identify yourself.
Because we're on camera, so we need to.
No, go ahead. I didn't know the procedure, I'm sorry. I'm Marjorie Smith with the San Bernardino County VOAD, which is Voluntary Organizations Active in Disasters, and the Morongo Basin COAD, which are Community Organizations Active in Disasters. We're the group who declared your disaster last October. We learned a lot from that one, and so I'd like to meet you. All I want to do is introduce myself and invite you tomorrow to participate in the shakeout. It is drop, cover your head, and hold. The reason you hold is because 55% of the accidents that occur, severe accidents in an earthquake, occur because someone is running or trying to get away from something. Hold. Your sign up there says, what if the tap water goes off? Trona was off for 16 days in July. So what happens? These are these, I've given these to Beverly, and she's got them to hand out. There's 2 flyers. If you don't read anything else after this meeting, except these might save your life and your family. Thank you.
Apologies, turn your phones off if you have them on. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Jane Jarlsberg, live in Joshua Tree. I thought maybe I would introduce myself in another way, which you may not know. I'm actually a California senior legislator for the Assembly, and I'm going to Sacramento the end of this month for 3 days to talk about legislation that, and hopefully act on some things that will affect seniors in our district. I represent PSA 20. I just got back from meetings in San Bernardino. I'm part of the Senior Affairs Commission in San Bernardino. So, and I just woofed down dinner, so I'm sorry. The other thing that I wanted to mention was I attended the MAC meeting on Monday, and which was very good, and Rebecca was there. I'm hoping other people will attend. It's been amazing, the attendance and what we're talking about. But they invited Morongo Basin Haven on the agenda to speak and give a report, and I thought, why not the Water Board give a report at these monthly meetings? I think it'd be a way to inform the community, another part of the community, about what we're doing, just part of our PR. So, thank you.
Thank you. More public comments? Please identify yourself and your...
Good evening. My name is Dominic Hayden. I work for State Senator Shannon Grove, and I'm her field rep covering the San Bernardino portions of our district. So I live full-time in Yucca Valley, and we have a full-time office down here. It is on Joshua Lane, attached to Bob Dunn's State Farm building. I just wanted to come by tonight and introduce myself and let you know that we're grateful for all that you do, and we look forward to working with you. I took the Joshua Basin Water District's tour last week, and it was phenomenal. I was very, very impressed with all of the demonstrations and got to see the work in progress that you guys are doing, which was really cool, as opposed to looking at, just a building or a tank or something that's just sitting there. We got to actually meet with people who work for you guys and see demonstrations, and that was very cool. So I'm grateful for that. Senator Grove, I don't know if you know, but she's the minority leader in the California Senate, so she's in a position of leadership. She's the first female veteran to ever serve in the California legislature. She was in the Army in Germany when the wall fell. So she's on the Veterans Affairs Committee. Veterans Affairs is a big portion of what we do. We help people get access to their benefits, housing, and all sorts of different things. We also act as an in-between for our partners. So if someone comes to us and says, I've got a problem with my water bill, we've got contacts, especially now with you guys, so we can help direct them to where they need to go. And some of the time, it's stuff that we can actually take care of with the Franchise Tax Board or the DMV. We can help people navigate those different things. Just a couple weeks ago, we were able to help a doctor in Barstow who had been waiting on his license for just too long. We reached out to the license board and just asked, hey, where's he in the process? And that just reminded them that he was even trying to get a license, and he was able to get that license in 3 days to then serve the underprivileged community in Barstow. So that was really cool. There's all sorts that we can do. We're available to you. I'll pass out my business cards, but thank you so much for having me tonight.
Well, thank you so much for coming. Yes. Other public comments? If not, I will move to item number 6, the consent agenda. I have a motion to approve the draft minutes from September 18th.
I would be happy to make that motion.
Thank you much. I think we, General Manager, we had one correction or...
Yeah, I'm sorry, we'll be changing, get this number here.
Page 4.
On page 4, Joshua Basin Water District Attorney Representation, we'll be changing that to match the recommendation listed on the staff report.
Basically, it's saying from or to from, I think is the wording. With that correction, are there any other comments? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar. Second? Second. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Item number 7, Memorial Resolution number 191013 of the Board of Directors honoring Mickey Luckman. And we have with us tonight Mickey's daughter, Jennifer Carter. And I'm not quite sure how we're going to do this. I think I would like Mark to bring over the resolution, and if you will, and Jennifer, come on up. I'm going to read it, and I'll come about to the other side, and then the rest of the board will please stand behind us for hopefully a photo. Resolution number 191013, a memorial resolution of the Board of Directors of the Joshua Basin Water District honoring Mickey Luckman. Whereas the Board of Joshua Basin Water District has lost a valued member and leader within the passing of Mickey Luckman on June 9, 2019, and whereas not just Joshua Tree, but the entire Morongo Basin community lost a strong, forward-thinking, and knowledgeable leader and mentor, and whereas she previously served on many local boards of directors, such as the Mojave Desert Land Trust, Basin-Wide Foundation, among others, including the last 11 years on the Board of Directors of the Joshua Basin Water District. And whereas she was a strong conservationist, loved nature, and believed in each person taking responsibility for the planet. And whereas she was a talented artist and a big supporter of the Morongo Basin artist community. And whereas she valued every person and living thing and believed in peace, goodness, and compassion. Whereas Mickey Luckman has served as a good friend, a colleague to the Joshua Basin District and the Joshua Tree community and the Morongo Basin. And whereas, although she will be missed very much, her legacy, reflected in some of the important decisions that she helped make, which defend, support, and improve the district, will live on. Now therefore be it resolved that the Joshua Basin Water District recognizes the commitment Mickey Luckman exhibited for more than a decade by serving on its board of directors, including 4 years as board president, and hereby expresses its appreciation, gratitude for her many achievements and contributions to the Joshua Basin Water District and the entire Joshua Tree community. Be it further resolved that the Board of Directors of the Joshua Basin Water District does hereby adjourn its regular meeting of October 16, 2019 in the memory of Mickey Luckman. Signed by Robert Johnson, President.
So we stand right here.
Yes,
You
please.
guys are doing great. No, Gary. Okay.
Okay.
Here we go.
Thank you, Jennifer. Item number 8, wastewater treatment strategy update. Recommend that the Board of Directors receive a presentation outlining the district's wastewater treatment strategy update and provide input on how to proceed. General Manager Ben?
Thank you, President Johnson. Staff has prepared, in conjunction with Dudek Engineering, a small presentation. The purpose of it is to kickstart the update of our wastewater treatment strategy and inspire some discussion from the board and members of the public as what type of road we take moving forward from here. So with that, I'll hand it over to Mike Metz, who will be leading us through the presentation.
Mr. President, members of the board, glad to be here today to talk about, as we talked about when we put this update into process, we're here to talk about protection of the groundwater. That's what we're going to be talking about, and we have this update. This is just a brief overview of what we will be talking about. We'll talk about the service area, to give you some little bit of information from the original wastewater treatment strategy. Talk about wastewater production, nitrate production, and then talk about some solutions and some near-term solutions and maybe some next steps. I would invite the board to ask any question at any time. We don't have to wait to the end. We want to just encourage you to ask any question that comes to your mind as we go through this information. This first slide is just a picture of the district's boundary and the service area that you serve. And a lot of the other graphics have that on there, so I just wanted to kind of give you a starting place to go from. This is the local topography. You can see I think everybody knows everything drains out to the dry lake, but as you can see, there's a distinct topography to the area and where things drain to, so I just wanted to remind the board of that and the public as well. There's also quite a few groundwater basins that we deal with out here. Now, for this district, it's mainly the Copper Mountain and Joshua Tree groundwater basins, and most of it we'll talk about where the water comes from. Of course, to the west we have the Warren Basin, and then there's the 29 Basin and the others in the northern part of the district. But groundwater basins that we typically get, that we get our water from, primarily would be the Joshua Basin. As you can see from this graph, that's the bigger part of the basin. The Copper Mountain Basin is a shallower portion that goes more to the north. So that you can see why we have most of our wells in that basin, because that's where a lot of the water is. So this is a picture of our distribution system. So you can see that water from the, we'll talk about where the water comes in a moment, but water is distributed over the whole district. I believe that's 95 square miles. So there's quite a bit of pipe, and the water goes all over that district service area. This shows you where that water comes from. These are where the production wells are from the district. And as you can see, I can't point at them with this because they're up there, but you can see that the well 10 is the furthest west well, and then there's 14 next to that, and then 15 and 16 and 17 are out in out to the east. So this shows where the water is coming from, and as you can see, 3 of those wells, and actually the biggest production well in the district is in the groundwater basin for the Joshua Tree Basin. So I guess what this shows is, even if you're living way in the north or somewhere outside of that Joshua Basin, your water actually comes from the Joshua Tree groundwater basin. That's an important thing for us to understand, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. There we go. So this was the original wastewater treatment strategy study area. It was about a third of the district, and as you can see, it was primarily located along the highway, and it's about a mile either side. This was the area that we initially started looking at from a wastewater treatment purpose, and where we were going to try to institute some wastewater treatment. This next slide shows you the parcels that are in the district. You can see that there's quite a few parcels that are outside of that service area, but there's also, you can see the dark areas toward the western side of the district. There's quite a few densely packed areas of homes, and that'll come into play in a moment. But this just gives you an idea. So some of the information that was the givens for the old wastewater treatment plant strategy. There was about, in that green study area, there's about a little over 7,000 parcels. About just under 4,500 of those was developed at that time. And it's pretty much the same today. There's been some more development, but it's still in that general range. As I said, the study area was about 1/3 of the district. Now, when we started that wastewater treatment strategy, it was 10 years ago, and we looked at this existing customers, and we said, okay, for the initial strategy, we're going to exclude existing customers, people that are on their own septic facilities, recognizing that they were putting wastewater into the ground and they were having an impact on the groundwater, but for the first thing, that was excluded. We also looked at, with the USGS, looked at what was the density at which we felt wastewater would have an impact on the groundwater. And they came up with a threshold of 2 dwelling units, houses, per acre. If you were that or less, then you were excluded. So that was another large chunk of land within the study area that was excluded. The USGS, in doing their study, identified that we expected to see nitrate impacts on well 10, which is the closest one to these developed areas, within the next 10 to 15 years. And we have a graph of that in a minute. I'll show you what we've really experienced there. The impact of existing customers was not evaluated in that study, and we have done it. You'll see that we've looked at existing customers now to see what that impact might be. New customers carried, and because of this, these exclusions that we had, anybody that came in and developed within the district was carrying their load or their cost for protecting the groundwater basin. but there was a lot of impact that wasn't being addressed at that time. So, and also there would be, because of that, there's really a minimal advancement that has occurred within the groundwater protection goal, toward the groundwater protection goals. So these are the reasons why we took on the update of this study. So now if you look at this one, this was, again, the original study area. The green area is the original study area. Those little red dots are the parcels that, as of last year, were taking water. They were actually getting water. We have water records for those. So what we did is we took those water records, and for this study, we just took 90% of that water that they are taking and said, okay, that's what they're putting out. The other 10% either gets consumed or used in other ways that are evaporated or whatever. So for this study, that was our approximation. But you can see that those red dots are pretty densely packed in some areas. So there's the wastewater production. That's what I said. If you look at the district, it goes all the way up to the northern boundary, and it has its areas of concentration. From the production data that we got from the water system by land use, 92.5% is single-family dwelling units. There's 44.5% is institutional. There's another 1.1 of multifamily residential, and 1.9, totaling up to a little over 1 million gallons a day, 1.1 million gallons a day. And that's the wastewater production. So the actual, if that's 90%, then the actual water use is more like 1.3. So this kind of gives, this is a representation of how septic tanks put nitrates and wastewater into the ground. The groundwater is, in our case here, the groundwater is about 400 feet down. That's generally what it is. So it takes a while for the water from your septic tank to get to that groundwater table. That was what we had the USGS studying those years, is how long was that going to take. And so you can see from this that the water from the septic tank goes down through the ground, eventually reaching the groundwater table. And as it goes down, it starts out, this kind of chemistry stuff, it starts out as ammonia. And as it goes down through the ground, the natural bacteria in the ground transfer that to nitrite, and then eventually to nitrate. And that nitrate is what you don't want in the groundwater. That's the bad stuff. So this is a simple, well, it's a little bit complicated, but it's a little bit complicated. But I'm going to try to simplify it. How's that? If you look on the right side of that graph, the organic nitrogen and the ammonia, those are the two things that come into a treatment plant. Those are the things that go into your septic tank. And then there are bacteria that as I said, change that ammonia and that materials that change it to nitrite and then the nitrate. And then ultimately what you want to do in a treatment, this is basically what we're doing in a treatment plant, is we take those materials, we grow the bacteria that change the ammonia into nitrate. Then we use a different type of bug. By not giving it air, it uses the oxygen off of the nitrate to breathe. Therefore, what you end up with is just nitrogen gas that goes off into the atmosphere, which is the vast majority of what air is made up in anyway. So that's the process by which we treat wastewater to get it to not be a problem in your groundwater. So we talked about nitrate in the wells. If you look at this graph right there, the red line is well 10 over since 1980s and all the way through last year. And as you can see, there has been a marked increase in nitrate in well 10 since about the late 90s, mid to late 90s. It has been continuing to grow. So, and keep in mind, well 10 is that well that is right there it's right next to the building here in the back here, but it's here in the area where most of the development is and where it's most densely packed. We did put all the other wells on there, and you can see wells 14, 15, 16, and 17. They're all pretty much right around that 10 milligrams per liter level. and that's pretty normal. Now, there's two other lines on there. One is the one up at the 45. The 45 milligrams per liter is the limit. So on well 10, we're more than halfway there. So it's time to really start thinking about these kind of things. So this is the same graph that I showed you a minute ago and called it wastewater. So by what you just heard, you can look at that same graph and say that's nitrate going into the groundwater. And again, you can see some of the areas that are close to the wells. Those are, again, our three biggest producing wells right there. The one closest to the east being well 10, which is right in that concentration area that's around this part of town. So what we looked at is, we looked at these concentration areas, and we picked on 4 of them. We got the area that's, and I'll talk about them in just a moment. We got these 4 concentration areas that we looked at, one being up to the north there, up on the other side of the fault. But it's a growing area, and it's pretty densely packed. This was concentration area 1. This is right here around the district where most of the commercial is and where most of the densely packed residential housing is on both sides. This is just a blow up of that area. You can see that we have the commercial along the freeway. There's some institutional in there, but most of it's densely packed housing. Area 2, mostly just housing, but there's some institutional areas in there as well in the yellow. 3, you can see again how that area is. This is the one up to the north, and then 4 is an area that's out to the east again. So from that, we took the information on the flows. So the district has a little over 13,000 parcels, of which the 4, a little over 4,000. That might not be, no, that's right. A little under 4,500 are developed for that 1.1 million gallons a day of wastewater production. So that's about a third of the district. Now, if you remember, the original wastewater treatment strategy area was about a third of the district. But what we're saying is that third that we were looking at really wasn't the third we needed to look at. It was the third that was spread out all over the whole district. So you can see that we're changing where we're looking at. The original wastewater treatment strategy area was the 7,000, 3,000 developed, 800,000 in gallons per day. About 45% of that area was developed. But you get into these 4 concentration areas that I just showed you. The concentration area 1, which is the one right here, the really densely packed one right around us, it basically ends up being 240,000 gallons a day of wastewater that is produced just in this one area. If you compare that to the total district of 1.1, that's 20% of the wastewater that is produced in the whole district is produced in this one area. So that gives you an idea, and it's roughly 2/3 built out. There's another third that can be constructed on. You go on with area 2, it's also 2/3 built out. 3 is 2/3, but 4 is actually 3/4 built out. And if you take areas 1 and 2 alone, that's almost 300,000 gallons a day of wastewater that's being produced and put into the ground without being treated for nitrates. And so from that standpoint, that's a very concerning thing. And that's why we're kind of taking a different look with the update, to talk about a bigger area and also look at where these concentration areas are and how they're affecting the groundwater. This area number 1 is directly affecting well 10, and you see the impact of that. So some of the near-term solutions, one of the things that we've talked about, actually we've been talking about it for quite a while, is a potential for a package treatment facility that would treat this densely packed area here in the downtown area. Now that wouldn't be here. We would put it out to the east, probably on the other side of Border Avenue. So if you remember, that's where the groundwater flows, and that's where the natural drainage goes to. So we would be able to drain by gravity to those areas. That facility would approximately be about 500,000 gallons a day. If you remember what I just said, 2 of those areas added up to 300,000, and they're only about two-thirds developed. So you'd have that plus room for anything else that came in. So, and that's just it's not a given yet, but it's a thought process that would help take off some of that flow that's going into the ground right now that's affecting well 10 right now. So that's why we kind of looked at that particular area. The other thing we look at is for groundwater protection throughout the rest of the basin, extending the original wastewater treatment study area out to the whole district to look at what's happening everywhere and how would we handle that. All of the customers are receiving drinking water from the Joshua Basin, so it's only right that everybody help protect that groundwater. That's kind of the thought pattern there. So that's groundwater protection then becomes every customer's responsibility to participate in some form. We haven't decided what that form is yet, but it makes sense not to just look at a few people, look at who's benefiting and what we're trying to protect.
So,
and then, sure, go ahead.
Mr. President, if I may. Did I hear just in there that the cost of a package treatment plant in this very local area right here, that to protect well 10, would the payment for that or the financial burden would fall on the entire district?
Well, I haven't.
Or would it be just the people that are directly contributing to the problem would be paying for it?
You want to address that, or you want me to? I'd be glad to.
Yeah, I mean, the facility, as far as the collection system and the facility, as it gets built, the folks that are receiving a direct benefit from that would help pay for that. So let's say that we addressed nitrate area 1 first, just as an example. There'd be water main or sewer mains within that area that would be upsized to allow the flow from nitrate area 2 to enter into it. So that increase of capacity could be paid by nitrate area 2, but only the nitrate area 1 would be fully burdened by those initial costs, and so on and so forth. So just like the treatment plant as well. The treatment plant would be serving nitrate contaminant area 1 or 2, but anything that we had to build onto that for future use could be burdened by other folks. The groundwater protection portion kind of comes into the fact of the effluent that we would produce, what we're doing with that. So if we're using it for recharge water, things of that nature, cleaning it up, then those folks would be charged for benefits such as that, district-wide.
And
if that answers it.
I would add to that. We haven't really thought through that portion of it yet. We're just getting to the portion of defining what we might need to do, and we would do that. But I could, from my standpoint, I agree 100%. The people who are benefiting directly from the treatment plant or the sewers would pay directly for that. But because there's a benefit to the groundwater, there could be something else that other people are contributing to, because eventually there's going to be a need to serve or have a treatment in those areas. For instance, there was the treatment area 3 that was up on the mesa, up above the fault. It's getting pretty dense there. That wastewater is not going to come that far down to this treatment facility. There may be a need in the north or to the east for another treatment facility somewhere in the future. We need to be planning for that, and because we're going to need to protect those groundwater basins as same as they are here. We're just focusing on these 4 areas because they're the most densely packed. You get the biggest bang for your buck, so to speak, for those. But there would be, I agree, it would be definitely the people that are benefiting would pay for the facilities directly.
Yeah, couldn't that theoretically be proportional cost? Those that get the greatest benefit would
Exactly.
pay the greatest amount, but we all benefit since most of our water's coming from the Joshua Tree subbasin, and we're all benefiting from that water. We all have an interest in keeping it clean. So.
Right, and I think this is one of the things where we talked about you guys want feedback from the board in terms of these type of things. How do you feel about that, and what is the board's opinion on how we go forward with these type of things? That's why we haven't gone forward with them yet to define it, because we want to get the board's input. The last thing that's on there is this ongoing groundwater monitoring. As you can see, we've been monitoring well nitrates for a long time, back into the early 80s and before. So it's important to keep an eye on those things so that we know what's happening out there and what's going on. And then keeping up with this strategies, or this information is important. The last slide is the potential next steps. Obviously, to finish this study, we're going to take input, we're going to go forward, but maybe there's a conceptual design that we can do, and that's just, big, high-level look at the potential for this downtown treatment facility. Where would lines go? Where would the plant possibly be? And those type of things. We would look at potential funding sources for this. Now, there are lots of grants out there, and there are lots of funding mechanisms that we haven't identified yet, but we do know exist. So everything we can do from a funding source helps to build these facilities and helps to cut the costs on the customers. The ongoing wastewater treatment planning, we got to keep doing that. Finalization of this report, as I said. But I think what I'd like to get across with the board with the last thing is, we started 10 years ago with a wastewater treatment strategy. How are we going to take this district from totally on septic tank to someday possibly being totally off septic tanks? That's a big time frame, and that's a big challenge. But I think what we're doing here 10 years later is we're transitioning from that strategy to a plan. And that plan is going to say, we have these things that we know are a problem, and we're going to do these things to affect those and to solve those problems. And so that plan, you start, like I say, you start moving away from a strategy into a real planning effort that's identifying facilities that are going to be built someday in the future. Not necessarily very soon, but that's up to the board as to how that goes. With that, I'll just open it up to more questions if there are any.
If I can at this junction, I'll take public comment, and then I'll close public comment, and then I'll get the board's comments. Yes, ma'am. Yes, please.
My question may be stupid or naive, but as a property owner in this district, I'm wondering if there's anything that the users of septic can do to reduce the nitrates at in our homes. I mean, is there anything that we can do, any additive or use of water or anything that can change what's happening in our septics?
The simple answer is no. But because it's a biological process. I mean, you basically use water, you go to the bathroom, you take showers, you put food down into, the garbage disposal. I mean, you certainly can not put food down the garbage disposal. That's a biological type of material that will get broke down. But I guess what I again, without getting too wonky about the whole thing, these microorganisms that take that food material, which is biological material, they eat that. What they put off, what they excrete is nitrates. They're nitrites and then nitrates and then those type of things.
So it's a natural process.
There's a natural process that's going on here. So the easy answer is no. Now, there are septic facilities that can do what we call that process, the little circle thing that I did is the denitrification. There's nitrification, denitrification is what you do in the treatment plant. And so you get that nitrate out. There are septic tanks that do that, but they're very expensive, extremely expensive. That's why they're not usually used. There is one thing that we didn't talk about, but as you build a treatment facility like we're talking about to serve a bigger area, there's an economy of scale that comes into it. You're building one facility that's affecting a lot of people, so the cost is spread over a lot of people so that the individual cost goes down. The bigger it gets, the more that individual cost goes down. So, that's the reason why. If everybody went and put in these other type of treatment facilities on their own, it'd be very expensive. And the commercial establishments downtown that have to put, they're having to put in a treatment facility, well, that's a very high cost for one user. Where if you could take that and spread it over many users or several users, it becomes much more cost effective, and you get the economy of scale. Hope I answered the question.
Thank you.
Hi, Mike, Gail Austin. My question is, are there any parcels that are not above the aquifer or their nitrates would not go into the aquifer? Could they stay on septic forever and not be included in the sewer?
Let me go back to, let's see if I can go back to,
The first one.
let's look at this one right here. And this is where I was talking about where the water comes from. So if you look in the white lines that are in the background, those are the groundwater basins that I show right in there, that I showed before. And then if we go to the next one, where the wells are. So everybody is getting the water from that basin. And that's the water that they're doing. Now, if you're way up at the north or somewhere to the north or east, and you're on a septic tank, the water that is going out of your septic tank is not going into the Joshua Tree Basin. It's going into the Copper Mountain Basin, which is doing the same thing to it that we would do. And if we go back a little further, this one here, if you look at the Copper Mountain Basin, how deep it is, and the other one, how deep it is, how much water's in there, it doesn't take as long to mess up the Copper Basin, Mountain Basin, as it does the other. I'm not saying that that's going to do that. One house is not going to contaminate the whole thing, but what I am trying to say is as areas grow, and you get these concentrated areas, that's where it starts to having the impact. So the answer to the question is yes, there are people who are discharging that aren't discharging to the Joshua Tree Basin, and therefore they're not contaminating it. And if you're in an area that you're the only person for 10 miles, you could stay on there for a long time and it wouldn't have an appreciable effect. So we'll take those kind of things into account. But what we're trying to get away from is narrowing our focus to not the whole district, because those are the areas where we know there's a lot of development, because everybody gets that water. These people are contributing to potential nitrate contamination of the water, but everybody's got to drink it. So there is some component of protecting the Joshua Tree groundwater basin that falls on everybody. Maybe, and like I say, as we said, the treatment facility itself that's treating their wastewater may be the extra component that they would pay for being direct, but everybody drinks the water, so we need to protect the groundwater that everybody drinks. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I just need arguments for when people say, well, I'm not doing it. I want to be able to say, you're drinking the water.
Yeah.
We're protecting the groundwater.
Right.
That's what it's about. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, any other public comments? If not, I'll close public comment and open it to comments from the board. Start with Director Reynolds and move this way.
Thank you. Mike, if you would move to that slide right there. See what mine, please? The historical nitrate concentration slide. It's a heck of a crick in my neck to keep looking back.
That's why we got it there for
So
you.
I appreciate this, by the way. I have several questions about this graph specifically. To put it all in one big group, time versus volume versus how long do we have, and then you back that up to making your strategy and plan. And just to categorize where all my questions are going to be going to. First question is on the vertical graph. There are numbers from 0 to 50.
Yes,
What
sir.
do those numbers represent?
Concentration of nitrate.
Concentrate, what are they, parts per million?
Milligrams per liter.
Parts per million, milligrams per liter, parts per million are the same thing,
Okay.
so.
And so up here at 45, that is, what does that number represent?
That is what's called the maximum contaminant level that's allowed. So once you pass that, you're in trouble. You start
Okay.
getting fined.
That's our trouble number.
That's your trouble.
Okay. And I'm leading up to time. At the rate we're going, how much time, I see the graph and it's increasing, but how much time before today and when we hit that number?
I didn't project that out, but I mean, if I'm looking at that, we really can't, well, first of all, I could project that out with a straight line and say, okay, it's gonna hit here, but we don't know that. It's because the amount of nitrate that's in the water now came from houses that were here many years ago. Like I said, it had to go through 400 feet of ground before it got to the groundwater table. And so it didn't do that in a day. You know, it took a long time for it to get there. So the rate at which it's going to increase depends on the rate at which it goes into ground and then the rate at which development might occur. Because in the future, there might be some additional development, houses, commercial, whatever, that are going to be putting that in. And that will eventually get there. So it could go up and level off. It could go up and get steeper and get faster. We really can't say what that is. But if you project just a straight line along that, I would say that's 2020. You're looking at 2060 maybe, maybe well, more than that, 2080, something like that, if I projected it with a straight line. But we don't project it that way because it's, we don't know what it's going to do, go up or down or level off, or what it's going to do.
Okay.
What we want to do is start taking out the nitrate that's going into the ground, so now that will definitely level off, or it will go up at a much slower rate because there's not anybody putting it in. The more people putting it in, the faster it's going to go up.
Okay, one of my favorite sayings is solution to pollution is dilution. And so with the recharge, and I see the graph ends, I'm guessing 2016, 2018?
2018.
2018,
The
last
data
year?
from last year, yeah.
Okay. And so how will the recharge affect this increase on the graph?
The recharge basins,
Correct.
it's a very, very small impact, because if you think about it, how big that groundwater basin is and how deep it is, and the water that we put in there on an annual basis is a very low percentage, wouldn't you say, Mark?
Yeah, it's getting closer to what we take out of it. So.
Yeah, it's getting close to what we take out. So from that standpoint, the amount of water that's going in there now, the ground out here is very porous. The water goes in here and it goes down, hits the groundwater table, and it spreads out. That's the recharge. Over here, it goes in and it goes down. Now, it's going to go down faster over here because we're putting a lot of water in there. And you're going down. Over here, it's individual houses, all this stuff, and it's working its way down individually. This will dilute this in the groundwater table, and this will get diluted in the groundwater table. That number that we're showing right there as milligrams per liter or parts per million is the diluted number. That's the water we're pumping out of the ground. It's not we're not pumping up just the wastewater with the nitrates in it. It has gotten to the groundwater, it's mixed with the groundwater when it's pumped, and this is the number that comes out, diluted. Is that, I don't know if that answers your question.
Okay. Mostly, I'm looking for a projection.
We can project that.
I remember in 1980, I had heard the rumblings in Yucca Valley, you know, and here we are 2020, and now it's finally happening. That's 40 years.
Right.
40 years from now is 2060.
Yeah.
And so I'm also remembering, gosh, if they had acted on it 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, it would have been long since done, over and paid for, pennies on the dollar compared to what it costs today to get it through. Keeping that in mind and then projecting the amount of time that we have until it's too late. I don't want to be that board that's, okay, now guess what? We are 44 parts per billion. Tomorrow we need to fire up that sewer treatment center.
Well, it's worse than that. If it got to 44, you wouldn't be looking at treatment for wastewater anymore. Well, you would, because you want to stop it from going in. You'd still have to do that, but now you'd be having to treat your water.
Right.
You know, the water that comes out of the well would then need wellhead treatment to remove nitrates. And that's more expensive, actually.
Right. So what I'm after is a date.
I will definitely project something in the
Yes,
report.
a projected date. If things progress as they are, knowing population increases, you know, over the last 20 years, we've seen X amount of increase in population. Throwing in the fact that we are now recharging at X amount per how much is being drawn. All that adds into your happy engineering numbers, and maybe you can come up with a projected, oh my God, day. And then from there, you can look backwards and calculate what's it going to take to get there long before, and then how do we plan to get from A to B and prevent C.
We can definitely do a projection of that. I would also stress with that, when you see what's happening in well 10 right now, and well 10 has those concentration areas around them. Those, you've got the other wells that have people over them. They haven't, it's not the concentration though. And so there's nitrate going in there, and it changes from time to time what's in there, but it's holding pretty steady. Well 10's getting impacted by this extreme concentration of and it's also the longest, it's the oldest portions of the area that have been putting in the longest. So, but we'll definitely include that in the study.
Okay, well, I've dominated my question time long enough, thank you.
With the questions that have been asked so far, I'm hearing those stages of grief that I heard in Yucca Valley when they were told that they had to get a sewer. What can we do to treat our own systems? Nothing. What if I'm not near this, you know, NCA? Do I still have to pay? Yes. How long do we have before we reach that maximum contaminant level? Don't know. Does a recharge upset it? No, not really. These are all the things that we've just gone through with Yucca Valley. Mark was there through the whole thing. The rest of us lived through it, everything that everybody went through. I'm so glad we're starting this now because, you know, we're at where we're at right now. Now is the time. This is those 1980 for Yucca Valley. If they could have done this in 1980, we're at that, and we can do this now. There is no way that this is going to be a report that sits on the table.
Oh, no.
We are acting on this. And in Yucca Valley, the people were frightened, they were terrified, they were angry that it got to that point. And the state came in and told them they had to do it. And Yucca Valley had options. They're an incorporated city, they're a taxing entity. They could actually raise sales taxes, they could go out for things, they could work with the town of Yucca Valley, because this is the water district for the town of Yucca Valley and Yucca Mesa. They could go out and raise money in ways that we cannot. We are unincorporated, and the county, believe me, would come in and they would set assessment districts for everybody in Joshua Tree. And they would collect the money and they would raise it every year, and your property taxes, it would drive you out. And these are the things that if we don't do it and we don't take charge of this, we're just ceding control of this to the county and then the state and their ideas of what kind of a system we have to put in and how much they're going to charge us for it and who's going to be responsible. This is something that I'm so glad we're doing this. I wanted this. It's happening, and whatever we need to do, Mike, and workshops, working with the community, letting people know. Because yeah, those stages of grief, we've heard them here. You're going to hear them out there as well.
Yes.
And it's a frightening thing. It took 10 years in Yucca Valley from the time they got Jose Angel of Death came and told them that they had to do this, that they
I remember
fought
that.
and fought and fought. And they looked for all these things. Can we treat our water? What, can we do this? Can we do that? No, no, no. So, we're starting. We're starting. We're gonna come up with something, and we will take control of this. The county will not do it. The state will not do it to us. We will take control of this. Thank you.
You know, if I may too, it's an important consideration about this, you know, being involved in drinking water so heavily, we talk a lot about the things that the Division of Drinking Water regulates, right? And so we look at these maximum contaminant levels that have a direct impact on public health and things. Well, the Division of Drinking Water, of course, is under the State Water Resources Control Board, whose other division, you know, has to do with actually protecting bodies of drinking water. And so they don't necessarily look at it as you're going to approach the MCL or exceed it, but they also look at it as to, are you polluting your aquifer at all?
Yeah.
And so they can also formulate cases. When you look at high desert, you know, by the time the plant was moving and going into operation, or starting construction rather, you know, nitrate levels had dropped below half the MCL. But because they were above the background levels of natural occurring nitrate, the state still had a case to come in and basically say, you're polluting your aquifer, you have to do something about it.
And they can change those MCLs. I mean, they change them for chromium-6. They can
Sure.
change these MCLs as well, and all of a sudden, where we think we're at half, we could be exceeding.
Yep.
The state has an interest, this is California's new gold is water, and the state has a huge interest in having control of that water.
Pioneer Town is a good example of that, you know, 50 parts per billion for arsenic from the state for several years. They dropped that down to 10 parts per billion and threw half of California in non-compliance overnight, so.
29
Yeah,
is
a
it.
good example of that, there's something, you look up there, that the traditional background level is 10 parts per million, milligrams per liter. When you go to get a permit to treat your wastewater, typically 10 is what you have to get below. Is they want you to be below 10 milligrams per liter when you treat your wastewater.
And that's where
It has
Joey,
been
every line starting on this.
And they have been talking about, and there are some permits that have come out with less than 10, like 2 or 4. So, I mean, they do have the ability to push it down further. In this case, the background level's 10, it would be probably 10. The treatment facility out at the hospital that we do, the treatment level is 10. So that's what they would take, that's what they're looking for the nitrate to stay under.
All right, Director Hunt?
Wow, there's a lot. Well, just speaking to that last point, we're, well, 10's at over 25 right now, and the state wants us to be treating to 10, and I'm sure there's a good reason behind that. So that's another good sign to me. Also, you know, if you look at the trend line in the last few years, it's gotten steeper, and in theory, it should accelerate and get even steeper yet, because as you pointed out, the effluent that's reaching the groundwater right now is sometimes from like 50 years ago, and there's been increased effluent. There's more of it. We're going through a development period here in Joshua Tree that I don't see any end in sight. And you talked about the groundwater recharge facility, the fact that we're piling water on top of water. And Mark, how fast do we get that water down to the aquifer? It's like in 8 weeks or something, or
Yeah, right now it's about 9 feet per day, so it's around 20 days right in that area.
20 days.
20
So,
days.
you know, as we start putting more water on effluent on top of effluent, I would think it would stand to reason that, you know, when you're looking at projections, that would accelerate over time. The area is growing. We have other wells. We have 14. I know USGS has some, I guess it'd be sentinel wells that are, I'd be curious to know how fast the nitrates are moving toward, 14 to the east. But we have our biggest production well that could potentially be at risk in the future, in addition to 10.
Well, I would point out, Mark, you pointed this out when we were talking today. If you think about well 10.
Yeah.
The water level's not right here. When you turn on well 10, it creates a cone.
cone.
Depression, it's called.
Right.
So that cone is bringing water back in. So that could be what's preventing it from getting over into well 14, is we're pumping to well 10 so much. It's got this cone of depression, so it's bringing water this way and this way. So all of this concentration that's over it is getting sucked into well 10. If we got well 10 turned off and well 14 was on,
Right.
it would now start migrating towards well 14
We can
because it
see
would
it.
have.
Can see it going up in 14. So, and then also to the point of we all benefit from that water, including people way up to the north are getting it from Joshua Basin. But not only that, if we don't deal with this, they're going to have to help pay for new wells, for treating nitrates. So it's going to cost all the ratepayers money if we don't deal with this. And I think, to Ms. Austin's point, I think that's another argument to make, is that if we don't deal with this, the entire district's going to pay for it if we don't, if we don't grab the bull by the horns here. And, and think about our local economy. Right now, we have vacant lots in town. We have a need for more restaurants, places to go with 3 million visitors. You can't even get into a restaurant now. We all want to see any future development be in keeping with the spirit of our community, but those are planning decisions, and the community can be very proactive about what kind of development comes in. But we need some more downtown businesses right now, and they can't come in because it's so expensive to, if it's a restaurant, to do a package treatment plant. I would think that if we had a downtown sewage treatment plant planned, and we looked at a way to finance it, that we could find businesses that would want to come in that would contribute to that because of the economy of scale that you're talking about. It'd be a lot cheaper to pay a share of that cost than to buy your own treatment plant. So, and I think obviously the people that would benefit from the most should pay the most. But I think all of us as ratepayers benefit and also are going to be impacted if we don't do something about protecting our most important aquifer. So I think it's time for us to act. I do think we need to get out ahead of this and not wait until we're in the situation that Yucca Valley found itself in. And you make a very good point, Director Unger, about right now we have control. Would we lose some of that control over the process and over how it was paid for, and so on, if we let it come to the point where it's mandated for us to do it. So I'm really curious about the grants. Obviously, if we could get a combination of grants, all ratepayers paying a small share, and the people in the downtown area, especially new businesses, paying a bigger share because they would reap the greatest benefit. It seems like we can get there, and I think there's a way forward. We need to do it, and there's a way to do it. We have to figure it out and do it. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Am I on?
You are.
This is what specifically is called wastewater treatment strategy. This is on the web. It can be read by anybody. Yeah, I hope it is. It is a formidable document. It's something like 57, 58 pages, and it's packed with all sorts of exciting information. Regarding Jane's question about what she could do locally with her own septic system, one of the things you can do is to make sure that it has been serviced currently. Since you're a fairly new resident, I'm guessing that happened.
2.5 years.
But yeah, that's recent. Something that concerns me is what we meaning Kathleen Radnich and myself here at the farmer's market, is that people don't drink the water. Translation, confidence in the cleanliness of the water. And what we can do with this pending project is demonstrate to our ratepayers that we're being conscientious about the clarity and the helpfulness of our water. What I'm kind of seeing when I read this monster, I read it, I didn't memorize it, and is that it looks like this is some sort of a two-phase thing to me. One is future development and how we're gonna respond to future development, and the other is to protect what we have currency. If we're up to half of our MCL in well 10 or something like that, and when you look at that graphic of the flow over the map, the blue arrows, so to speak, it goes right through well 10, and then right to what would it be then, 3 of our other major wells, and it just misses one that's closest to the highway. So everything is affected by the flow from the south over to from the western part of the city down the slopes and through downtown and onward. And this flow through here, it's interesting what you just said, is going to affect 4 out of the 5 wells. At least when we get 14 going again. And so that's really, it's concerning to me. And what you're saying is, just recently I heard about this cone or whatever that is created when we pump from 10. If we could clean in the proximity of 10, then what flows out to the rest of the wells would be potentially less because we're slowing it down. So anyway, what I'm seeing is it's a two-part thing. One is this distant future, and one is the immediacy of well 10. And also this thing about the future is, frankly, I am not seeing big development here now, which was projected in this report. We've had 10 years that this report has been in effect, and I have not seen it. When you read it, you'll see that a small development is up to 400 units. And the one that we were sweating bullets on up to the south here was 248.
That's that Husing report, and people use that. It had a build out for Joshua Tree, 96,000 population.
The Buxton report, wasn't it?
Husing, Buxton, yeah, and it's like that was never gonna happen. But, what if it did?
One of the things I don't remember is some of these projections about what the cost would be per property. It was, they were talking about a number of something like 17,000 properties. And so they're projecting some pretty, in the 2009 report, is projecting much more of an explosive kind of growth than we've seen so far.
Can I respond to that? In that document, we really weren't projecting growth, because there's no time frame over which that occurred. We were just looking at if that area, the study area, was to build out, what would be the situation. It is a growth, but I just want to make sure you don't see it as, we didn't say, okay, this is going to happen in 20 years. So that'd be a growth rate that would occur. We were just saying in there, here's the, we had this much area, the third of the district. In there, we took out existing people. In there, we took out people under 2 dwelling units per acre. And then we looked at everything that was left. And we said, if those developed, how much wastewater would we be producing? Now, what we're proposing to do now is look at everybody in those areas, in the whole district. But look at those, particularly those concentration areas where we can get the biggest bang for the buck, so to speak, of protecting the aquifer.
Yeah, that's the now part.
That's the now part, yeah.
Concentrations that we see now. One of your favorite expressions, Director Unger, is something about water is land use, or land use is water.
Water is land use, and unfortunately, the California Water Code, which was written a long time ago, does not reflect that. And a lot of those big developments didn't happen because we fought them. We fought them tooth and nail and kept them out. And I think the other people said, okay, well, I ain't going to Joshua Tree, It caused a lot of trouble over there. But water is land use, and it is even more so now when the water code and through the 50s and 60s incorporated cities look at their tax base, and so they look at growth. And so the very bland assertion that all you can make from the water code is, do we have enough water to service this project for like, what, 25, 50 years, whatever, a reasonable amount? And you can't say, well, yeah, there's water underground, but, you know, it's precious, it's in danger of being, you know, polluted. We don't have a plan for that. How are we gonna, you know, take care of that water, keep it clean, keep it flowing? And so water is land use, and I think I would love to see the California Water Code updated to reflect that, so it doesn't just benefit.
So evidence.
Sorry.
You got her going.
Sorry, that is what I always
Here's
say.
what I'm going at, then I'll lay out, because Bob's impatient with me talking too much. Is that LAFCO, that's Local Agency Formation Committee, which gives us the authority to exist in two areas. One is providing water to the community, and the other is waste in the form of these small package treatment plants. And then I'm reading in the report that it's more practical if you have these small package treatment plants in some sort of an arrangement so that you can have a regional facility at the end of it if growth comes to the point where they are not handling it, or it's an expense thing or whatever. Is there a way that we can control where properties are built by being able to arrange where these package treatment plants are, bearing in mind that we need gravity and appropriate pipe size to make this stuff flow to where it's supposed to flow? I'd at least, you know, I don't know anything about this stuff, so what I would like to see is that it be considered and possibly incorporated into the new, excuse me, into the new plan about how these things can be done. That's future part. That's not the immediate part. That's in that future part, which we kind of haven't seen yet. It's incredible to me. Another thing I'd like to see done is that number of small development reduced from 400. We think of that as a big one out here. And it is built into this report in more than one place that developers pay for this stuff.
Yes.
You got that part? Developers pay for this part. We're not going to have somebody put 400 homes in there and require some massive treatment plant and then have the entire community fund it. It says in here that that's not the way it is. Developers, as we like to say, pay their own way, and that's a big deal. So a lot of these really large costs that are described in this report, which is 9 years old, inflation is going to change all these numbers, and you want that built into the new report. It says so in here. This is all going to change. So, and also too, just finally, is the CIP, or capital improvement report, is mentioned in here, and we need to kind of make sure that these things, like we want to do with all of our reports, make sure they dovetail. That kind of thing. Thank you for the extra time.
If I could, the general manager actually touched on one of the issues that you touched on just now. Take for instance, if we were to build a downtown facility, we would want it down gradient from us, which is to the east. We would make it collect a certain area, whatever it is. But, and as the general manager said, that facility could be made to where it could be expanded. The pipelines would be put in place with sufficient size so that they could be extended and get more areas as growth occurred. So, and then, as you just said, say the development occurs over here to the west, and they need to tie into that system and expand the plant. Well, that developer would pay for that expansion, and that happens everywhere. I mean, that's how that, you know, you start. You don't build the big plant first because you don't have enough wastewater to keep it going. So you build small and you expand, and that's where the strategy turns into a plan. And that's exactly what I'm talking about, is planning what you're going to do over time. But we don't really say when that time is, because that depends on the growth. You know, and that depends on when you need it. Right now, we've identified 4 areas that could use a package treatment plant right now.
Yeah. Well, and part of the thing that I consider too was that we've got a census coming up. And also when this one was written, there was a census coming up. This was before the last census, so I don't know if you're considering waiting until we get the results of that, because you do have recommendations or opinions or something in this report. And it would be, maybe it would have, when we go out looking for grants and stuff like that, to have the fresh census data in here too, and update some of these 10-year-old graphics and stuff. Sorry, Bob.
Mike, I appreciate it. All the comments are right on target, and I think, timely. We're a little bit ahead of the curve, but that doesn't last long. And I'm kind of hoping that you guys will contemplate maybe putting some workshops together or something, and we'll get public input, and we can really, make this thing happen, and keep everybody informed. So with that, I'll let you have final word.
Yeah, no, we certainly have enough information to move forward. We have some additional information to gather, and, we'll follow up with future workshops with the board to gain more direction where we need it.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Mike. It's good to see you.
Nice to see you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll move on to item number 9, General Manager's Report. Mark Van.
Thank you very much. Just wanted to touch on our CRP program real quick. Those guys are continuing installing water mains. We talked at our last meeting that they had completed the north side of the project on Saddleback and Juniper. They moved over to the south side, and Division Street between Sunny Hill and Torres, which is about 2,500 feet, is now complete as well with the water main laid in there. And so they're really nearing, about 50% of the pipeline installation portion of the project pretty quickly here. So they're moving along really well. So really proud of those guys and all of our staff for the way the program's kind of come together and got lifted off the ground. So it's moving around really well. Also have our 4-log application ready to submit to the state. So we've got our schematics and all of the operating plans and how we're going to operate it outlined in there, and the permit application all ready to send off to the state. So hopefully within the next few weeks after that's sent out, they'll have time to review it and get back with staff so that we can move forward with actually the installation process. So another thing we wanted to touch on, and I'll let Sarah go into detail on it. So we had started to receive several complaints and inquiries on some increases on some bills. And so after quite a bit of work from staff pulling reports from our billing system, we've been able to kind of come to a purpose on why that actually happened. So I'll let Sarah explain that.
Good evening. In September, we began meter reading the day after Labor Day, which was September 3rd. And September 9th, the following Monday, the software that we use for meter reading crashed. So all of the reads that were read up until that point were lost. So the software company had to reinstall the software into their meter reading equipment, and that took about a day. The very next day, the meter reading began but had to be started over. So what ended up is we had a little bit longer of a meter reading cycle than typical. And this month we finished on time, even though we still encountered some problems residual from that initial software crash. So this month we're going to have a meter reading cycle that's shorter than normal is what we're anticipating. But we are handling all of the concerns on a case-by-case basis. So anybody that has an issue that's come in, we've handled it. And then we'll look further to analyze to see if anybody was actually overcharged. And if they were, then we'll handle it accordingly.
Excellent. Thank you.
Is the billing period spelled out on the bill?
It shows
To
it.
reflect
So
that
anybody
extra-
can look on their bill and see the service period of how long, what date it began, and when the meter was actually read. So, we have the saying that you love tech until it doesn't work. So.
That concludes your report. I'll take any public comments if there are any. Go ahead. Please take the podium. Sorry.
Sorry. Jane Jarlsberg again. The increase is just a unit of use, right?
Just
That-
the unit.
That
not the-
people notice, which is really kind of minor. I mean, I noticed mine jumped a unit, but then I looked back a year ago and it was similar, so
What we noticed on a couple, it would jump a unit, so it's, and depending on which unit, $1, $1.80, depending on
Yeah.
how much water was used.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, Gail Austin. First, I want to say that I monitor Facebook a lot, social media, to see what's going on with the water district, and there were a lot of people talking about this issue. Once again, people were reminded, it's your responsibility to see if you have a leak or not, this or that. But this turns out it wasn't a leak this time, and so thank you for, I'm going to go onto social media and put what you said, because if there's going to be a shorter cycle, then people are going to be, oh, my water bill's lower, and then the next one, when it's regular, it's going to be higher. So I want to really get the word out there that there's going to be like 2 cycles before your water bill settles down again. The main complaint was that it put them up into a different tier, and people are really mad about that, because their bills, my bill jumped $50 because I went up into a tier that I don't normally spend a lot of time in, and so I just wanted to let you guys know that that was what the main complaint. The people are understanding their bills. They didn't quite understand the dates, but they were also, the ones that did come in here were just blown away by how the staff worked, explaining the bill, explaining why their bill was more. They were very happy with their customer service, and they were actually commenting about it, so I wanted you guys to know that.
I'm glad Gail brought that up as well, because we actually went on to that feed that was on Facebook, and our staff actually started contacting all of those people. I think we made it through, 250 of them, quite a few of them.
We analyzed every single comment, and then the last comment that came in that we just saw tonight, that was from the initial conversation starter, commented on how well her customer service was. So we tried to make right with a bad situation.
You guys are great.
So, Peggy and Chris worked really hard this week, too.
So the difference in the tiers that was adjusted?
Yeah, anybody that we will analyze the bill individually. If there's a problem, then it will be adjusted, and the tier might be shifted, the water used to be shifted into the next month, if that makes sense, into the appropriate tier.
Okay.
I'll close the public comment then, or directors, any comments? I'll just say thank you, staff, that was excellent. Item number 10, directors' comments, reports of meetings attended. I'll be the first up, September 26th, Mojave Water Agency. Pretty standard business, a couple items on there, though, that were of particular interest, was that the consideration of authorization task orders with Mojave Desert Resource Conservation District for work plan on fiscal year 2019 and 20, which is our swamp cooler proportion here, this study, and goes into some elaborate detail that I'm sure Kathleen has already informed us about, because I already knew this forward and back, so thank you, Kathleen. But they're going to start again in spring, and so that's to be coming, and they were very appreciative of our attendance at the meetings as usual. I'll move on to the Legislative and Information Committee, and that's Vice President Unger and Kathleen Radnich.
I want to just add, since I knew I was coming up, the next Teardrop newsletter will address, and so please let everyone know, it will address 5 or 6 ways your bill can be impacted. It can change based on, of course, obviously leaks, billing cycle, there's just, we spell it out. And so people who are still questioning it, it's only a couple weeks away, they'll be getting that newsletter. Have them read it. It's really, we try to simplify it. And we also encourage in the newsletter that if any of these reasons for your bill being unusually not what it should be, doesn't, if you can't figure it out, call us. And we have nothing to hide, we're here for you. So I just want to point that out to add on to that. Next week, October 24th, 1:30 p.m. here in the district office until 4 p.m., United Way of the Desert will be here to help low-income assistance for water bill. It's our program that they administer, and they're coming personally to help people fill out forms in the afternoon here. So it makes it very easy. They don't have to go down the hill, find a computer, whatever. It's a one-time only. I hope word gets out. District tours were awesome. Our staff really nailed it this year. Mark had them actually speak to what they know best. It wasn't just one person kind of covering a bunch of stuff. And the passion that came out of them when they talked about what they do and how they do it, it was infectious. I loved it. It was great. Kudos to the staff. Awesome job. With that, I also want to defer to Vice President Unger and to Director Floan to talk about the Great Shakeout. Since I was doing the market, you guys were doing the Great Shakeout. We had to divide and conquer, so I will be quiet and let you report on that. Thank you.
Shakeout was fun. It was well attended. There were a lot of people there. And Tom had some great stuff because he's got his Jeep Club, and he had all kinds of survival gear and was able to show people how to use it, how to adapt it. And a lot of it had to do with water, everything from boiling water, straining water, getting safe water in case of an emergency. And there was a lot of people, and people who had been on the tour actually showed up at the booth as well.
Yeah, it was a good day. The time passed quickly. It was somewhat longer than our time at the market, and thank you for coming to relieve me at 1:30. That was very nice of you. The helicopters are one of the most exciting things because they take off and land when people have already had their tent enclosures up and all of that. It can, the dust clouds and stuff like that, it adds a certain amount of drama to it. It's like an emergency demonstration besides just a shaking booth. But yeah, we had some there. Folks were curious about some of the things that they can do. I mean, when I tell them, for example, that they can take one of those sun-powered garden lights that they put along their pathway that costs like $5 a piece or whatever it is at Home Depot, you can take that into your house at night if there's a blackout of some kind, or Edison shuts off the electricity because it's windy. That's a new thing. It used to be that maybe they would do it because of the fires and all of that, but now they're doing it as a preventive thing, potentially doing it as a preventive thing if it's windy, when here we are in a windy place. So having some of these kind of things in mind is tremendously important. We had a good time there.
Okay, the Finance Committee is moved to November something. It'll be at 13th, and we'll be back on schedule with that. Water Resources and Operation, Director Hund, Director Reynolds.
So we covered several things that have been discussed here tonight, and one of those was General Manager Ban showed us a diagram of the 4-log treatment facility that will be built at well 14 in order to ensure that the chlorine stays in contact with the water long enough to kill any contaminants, any bacteria that might be in the water. Even though the well generally, it's been very vexing to all of us. Why, there'll be multiple tests with water that fully meets the standards, and then there will be one bad test, that is just beyond a threshold that's not acceptable to the state. But nevertheless, in order to get that well back online, which is our biggest producing well, we need to develop this treatment system that injects chlorine and then keeps the water in contact with it for a certain period of time. And it's pretty fascinating. It's basically a system of pipes that goes back and forth, and the chlorine is injected in, and then it's the water goes through the serpentine path where it remains exposed to the chlorine. So I forget the exact distance, but it's something like 1,200 feet of pipe.
Yeah, that's what.
1,200 feet of pipe that has to this sinuous band of pipe that has to go back and forth. I think Director Reynolds and I were both envisioning something like 100 feet or 40 feet, but in order to meet the state's requirements, you have to build a system that's 1,200 feet long. So it was really fascinating to see. It's a real simple and elegant system to treat the water to ensure that it's safe to drink. And soon we'll have, at long last, have well 14 back online. So, and then we talked a bit about the progress that's been made on construction of the new pipe, the new pipeline to replace our very old and leaky pipes. And I'm just floored that we've laid on the order of 10,000 feet of pipe already. We're going to get nearly 2 miles of pipe in the ground during this season, and that's super impressive. And I think it, for us that have been on the board for a while, and especially folks that have been on the board for a long time, this is the real, fruition of, of everyone's efforts in the Water District, the staff, the board, to, do what needed to be done to be able to replace and modernize all of our facilities, and in particular to replace our aging pipes. So I think we're now in a very good place where every year we're going to be able to replace enough pipe that we'll be through the entire district in a decade or so, and we won't be facing some of the problems that many water districts are facing today, where they have systems that are totally failing, and they're having to spend a lot of money just making, putting Band-Aids on something that needs to be completely replaced. So, and then we also talked a little bit about added security for the shop, and they've made some improvements there to ensure that our facilities and our equipment are protected from vandalism or theft. That's all I have. Mike?
Boy, you nailed it well. Good job. There's not much I can add on to that, but I was surprised at the length and the size of the pipe for that 4-log. Now that length, does that actually make us an 8-log system? I remember we were talking back and forth.
Yeah, for redundancy, it's basically doubles the amount of pipe there,
Okay.
so that it's...
But still, my goodness, that's a whole lot of pipe. And that was surprising. Glad to see the pipeline going in is just wonderfully as fast as expedient, with a new crew, new equipment, a new plan. Boy, you just got to be tickled pink on your guys, and congratulations.
Well, and I just wanted to add, they're building that facility so that I don't think it's going to be if, but when the state comes back for new standards for treating the chromium-6 in our water, they will already have the facility built so that they can put the stannous chloride system in. That is the system that we're likely to use to treat the chromium-6, so we won't have to, they're thinking ahead, which I really appreciated. Also, there's a point at which a sensor checks to see what the chlorine concentration is, to ensure that the chlorine concentration in the water is sufficient to provide for any disinfectant that's needed. And Director Reynolds suggested perhaps putting a second one in another location, and it made sense, and it provides redundancy, and I think that's something that Mark took under advisement to possibly do. So it was great to see one of our board members who has expertise in this field, help to make a project even better. But I have to say that project was very well thought out and done, at the lowest possible cost, and also it's going to incorporate a lot of labor from our own crew to save money. So once again, I think, the staff's done a stellar job of, planning and soon implementing a project that will benefit the district.
All right. Mojave Water Agency, Director Flohan.
That was me. I have notes this time. There's nothing to laugh about regarding that. It's just interesting when you go there and you see that it's so similar to what we do here, running the Mojave Water Agency, which is the state agency. It's where we buy our water for recharge. It's 130 miles round trip, by the way, and including even just paving their parking lot. I mean, that was a big deal here when we were arguing about paving the parking lot, and sure enough, they're talking about the same thing over there. Ours was worse than theirs, though.
Oh, yeah.
For some reason, I'm attracted to some of the boring things, not the finance committee. But one of the things that they had a discussion about when they were bidding on repaving streets and stuff like that, which apparently they use contractors for that, and we're doing much of that ourselves. When we do our piping, we're repaving ourselves. We got the asphalt spreaders and all that stuff. But anyway, they use contractors, and they talked about they just automatically put in the report, I think possibly like we do, a contingency, which is they say it's going to cost $15,000 to do something with a 10% contingency. And one of the board members says, well, wait a minute, maybe that's not enough. And somebody actually started talking about the contingency, the little extra money that's allowed for a project. And one of the things I'll be doing, I'm going to look into these kinds of things about contingency money. Where does it come from? What is its limitations on its use? And if it's not used, where does it go at the end? And stuff like that, and follow the money. Kind of a thing, and maybe in the process will inspire some confidence in our ratepayers that its board is paying attention to the small things, to the boring things. Thank you.
I like that. I like that. All right.
Money, you do it.
Future agenda items and directors' meeting training opportunities. Mojave Water Agency Technical Advisory Committee, Director Unger, that's on the 21st. Association of San Bernardino County Special Districts, Director Reynolds, that's on the 21st. High Desert Water Agency, we've added a couple other meetings on here tonight if anybody's interested in volunteering to go to these, and at a future board meeting we will determine which ones will be delegated or assigned. That list will come out, but October 23rd, High Desert. And if anyone is interested in that, let Beverly know. Mojave Water Agency is the 23rd, and I think that's Director Unger. Pipeline Commission is the 29th, and that's me, and it'll be somewhere, hopefully close. Bighorn Water Agency is October 29th, and 29 Palms is the 30th. And with that, I'll take director comments. I'll start with Director Reynolds, and we'll move toward closing the meeting.
Well, I've said about all I need to say, with the exception of I did attend the Pelicans dinner last week, and that was interesting. Nice thing about the Pelicans dinner is, my goodness, the people that go there are an impressive group. I sat next to Mark Lundquist and had a nice chat with him, getting some of the county. Mark Lundquist is the representative for Don Rao, our county supervisor, and I was able to have a nice conversation with him, and he gave me a county perspective on several of the items that are at hand locally in Joshua Tree. So that was interesting. Looking forward to the special districts meeting. Again, that is also a very good place to not only meet people, but see what's happening with other special districts such as ours, and you develop relationships, and you find alternate ways of dealing with problems. And very often I've come back with some helpful hints and ideas and things that have gone on, and problems other districts have had, and how we can mitigate to make sure we don't have that same mistake. Learn off of other people's mistakes, Grandpa used to say. Let them go through the trouble, and then you get the glory. And life is good. That's all I have.
And like you brought back in one of those special district meetings, that great book, Death of a Water District.
Oh, my goodness.
And that, absolutely, that golden little book. I just would like to thank staff for putting together a really lovely memorial resolution for Director Luckman.
yes.
I really appreciated that, and I was glad Jennifer was here to get that, and Nikki made me a much better director. I owe her a lot. Thank you.
Gary?
Just a little over a week ago, on Tuesday the 8th, at the Mojave Desert Land Trust, there was a celebration of the 25th anniversary of the passage of the California Desert Protection Act, the original act in 1994. It was, at that time, it was really groundbreaking. It designated 69 wilderness areas throughout the California desert. It elevated Joshua Tree National Monument to Joshua Tree National Park and added quite a bit of acreage. It also elevated Death Valley National Monument to Death Valley National Park and added quite a bit of acreage. Death Valley is now the largest national park in the lower 48 states. And subsequently, that conservation has been built upon with the designation of Mojave Trails and Sand to Snow National Monument, and also Castle Mountains National Monument, a small national monument kind of folded into other protected areas. Oh, also the Mojave National Preserve was created through the original act, and I think it's really, for me, and then in February of 2019, the second California Desert Protection and Recreation Act, a Recreation Act because it designated some of the OHV areas out in the desert permanently, but it also added wilderness and increased the size of the parks. And that particular bill that was passed in 2019, it was introduced first in the Senate by Dianne Feinstein, but it was when it was passed, it was co-authored by Senator Kamala Harris in the Senate, but in the House, it was introduced by Senator Paul Cook, and it was another author. There were 3 other authors, including Congressman Ruiz, but what it showed was bipartisan support for desert conservation, and we're starting to see the benefits of setting aside that land permanently for people's use and enjoyment and the protection of the resources. And it's having a great economic benefit to our communities having these parks. Sometimes maybe more than we want here in Joshua Tree, but it really is. And it's kind of becoming the lifeblood of the economies out in the desert. So it was a really special event. We had representatives, Dominic was there representing Senator Grove. We had Don Rao presented us with a resolution that was unanimously passed by all the San Bernardino County supervisors. We had representatives there from both senators' offices and Congressman Cook's office and Congressman Ruiz's office, and National Park Service, BLM, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps is actually working with the Mojave Desert Land Trust to conserve land here in the Morongo Basin that is buffers the base and also their flight corridors, so that they don't have folks end up moving into a spot where their windows are rattling every time there's or even more than our windows rattle already, every time there's a bombing run. So anyway, I just think it's a very special year, 25 years of desert conservation, and just wanted to share that with you. And then I'm just so impressed with staff that you would respond to over whatever it was, 250 Facebook posts to individual folks that post. I mean, that shows the dedication of this district to its ratepayers and its customers. I don't think many districts would have done that. So thank you so much for doing that.
Yeah, and I don't want to, just to say that we contacted them as well. We analyzed each of those bills, so we might not have contacted them, but we did look at them to make sure they weren't affected.
Many of them were not from Joshua Tree, so there's no way to contact them. But
Right.
the
Well,
ones that there was a problem, we reached out to.
Right, so the fact that you analyzed each of those and reached out when it was appropriate, so, well, you should take more credit, because you deserve it.
She's the one that said, I didn't actually call everyone, just 249 of them.
Anyway, thank you.
Customer service was busy. They worked really hard this week. They deserve the credit.
I guess there's been, in conjunction with this situation, and coincidentally, that bill would represent one of the highest water use periods of the year, too. I guess there was a bit of a growl out there about high water bills and high rates and such, and perhaps, I hate to generate work for people, but our
You're looking this way.
our community
we're all looking this way now.
outreach consultant, Kathleen Radnich, who's sitting in the back there staring at me, might consider some sort of a summary of how we arrived at the rate structure that we have now, because it's been a few years since we've implemented it, and we're going to have another rate increase, possibly 12% in March or so. And to have some sort of just a small summary of how the process occurred, the number of meetings and where they were and that they were open to the public and all these other kinds of things, how we arrived at what those rates are and what the need was, so we can possibly salve some of the anger that might be out there about water rates and such, because they're sort of what's that word when when you pile one percentage increase on top of another one? There's a word for that, I can't remember right now, but it's
Compounding?
Compounding. Thank you.
Sure.
Just a thought. If you're during the next several months, if you're looking for content.
I got some of that on the newsletter. I've already started. I don't have much space, but I've started showing the different tiers, how they're impacted by the new rate increase. And
You actually have the one whole newsletter, you explained everything.
well, I did in the past, but he wants us to revisit that.
Okay.
10 o'clock.
Good idea.
It's just a matter of when their attention level is up to where they'd be sensitive or receptive, I guess, to some more information about this kind of stuff and why we did it, and that there was a public process involved. It was methodical. It conformed with proposition whatever and whatever before we can arrive at these numbers, and we did it fairly, and we did it in a rational way, and I just think we should publicize that. Thank you, Mr. President.
I'd like to say thanks for all the folks that have come out. Special thanks to staff. I also, too, want to express my appreciation for Mickey Luckman's service, dedication, and just for her being. I hope Jennifer was okay with the presentation, the resolution. So staff, thank you for putting that together for us. Also want to be mindful of our first responders, men and women out there in uniform. Those a little less fortunate than ourselves. And with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Aye.
So moved.